Hi, welcome to the Bougie and Backpack podcast. My name is Angel Chin. I'm the co-founder of Bougie and Backpack, and I'm the founder of Pennywise Traveler. And I'm so happy to have Ravinder here today. Hi, Ravinder.
Hi, Angel. Thanks so much for having me on here today.
So for those of you guys that don't know, Ravinder was also a past speaker at our summit that we had in August, and she's also one of our speakers in October for our virtual summit. And we do have copies of the replays available in the show notes. So do you want to talk about your experience getting into points and miles and also solo traveling?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks so much. My name's Ravinder, and I'm the founder of the Travel Points Rebel. And it was a couple of years ago that I started really getting into the points and miles game here. It was really because the catalyst to it was because I had a milestone birthday coming up, and I really wanted to go in style in terms of that birthday trip. So I started to look into points and miles. Now, I did finally funnel my way into going on a fabulous trip on Qatar Airways on the Q Suites, which is like someone who's only ever been on economy classes to go straight up to the best, world's best business class was absolutely amazing. Now that I've been in the game for a couple of years now, I realized that it was probably one of the worst redemptions I made because I had no idea what I was doing. But what it's really allowed me to figure out is there's this exciting world of points and miles that you can really leverage in terms of going, amazing places and in style and using them for accommodations and stuff. But more so about the solo travel. It was the first time I'd actually done a solo travel trip. And it was the scariest thing that I've ever done. But man, have I had so much fun. And I love actually doing it now. And actually, it's a preferred way of traveling for me.
So once you got into points and miles, like how'd you learn about like the different redemptions and stuff? Was it mostly just like YouTube and like reading the blogs, or like what sparked your interest?
Yeah, I mean, so what sparked my interest was, like I said, I was coming up to this birthday and I was just like, I got to do something different. I've been pretty shy person growing up and stuff. And I just felt like this was the time for me to just really explore and figure out something completely new. So it was just like, I think I might have something on YouTube or podcast where people are traveling in points and stuff. And I'm like, what is this crazy world? How is it that I've never known about it? I need to learn more. And, it's one thing after another. You just sort of get into these rabbit holes of whether it's on Instagram or on YouTube. I just kept getting so intrigued about how is it that people are able to travel so cheaply using points. It's something that I never knew anything about. So I'm like, I need to learn more about this. So that was my first thing that I needed to do, is get on that first trip. And I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it in style, and I'm going to do it in a place that I've never gone to before. So that's really where it started. But now that travel bug's hit me, I'm just so excited to learn so much more about it. And now I have so many people asking me how to do it. And I'm like, where was I a few years ago when, we should all be learning this stuff. I feel like, in education or high school or college, we should be learning this kind of stuff, and we don't. And there's so much that people can take advantage of, and it's something that we're not taught. So I'm out here on a mission, especially in Canada, where we don't have a lot of points and miles conversations. I love what you guys do in the States, but there's lots of great opportunities in Canada too. So that's sort of my mission right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just because I get messages from people all the time that like, hey, do you know anything about Canada? And I'm like, oh, sorry. So we defer them to you. We're like,
yeah, there
hey,
you go.
we know some people, they spoke at our last virtual summit and they spoke about Canadian like points and miles style. So like,
yeah,
here's you.
Yeah. I mean, it's the one thing that I will say, and it's important to know that Canada and US, we're neighbors and we're friends, and Canadians can get access to US cards. But, there's a process to get US cards. So I always think that if you're a beginner and you're a starter in this space, learn about the credit card space that you have in your own country. And if it's in Canada, there's so many opportunities, and they're not as lucrative as in the States. You guys have tons of great redemptions and airlines and point systems and things like that. But this is not to say that we don't have it in Canada too. There's so many great opportunities that people don't know about. So that's what I'm sort of trying to get people to be aware of, because there's so many things that we can take advantage of.
So what's your favorite program to use in Canada?
So my sort of two go-to points programs that I like to go for is obviously through American Express, the MR points, because they're the transferable points. So you get a lot more options, right? Whether you're going to a airline transfer partner or a hotel transfer partner, you have the ability to choose which one. And then the other one, you either hate them or love them. I do love to collect the Air Canada and Aeroplan points. And because they're part of the Star Alliance, people always think that, oh, it's just Air Canada points. But, because they're part of the Star Alliance, you actually have the ability to redeem those same points for all of the different airlines within that alliance partner. So I've, traveled Singapore Airlines, Turkish Airlines, United. There's so many, Lufthansa. There's so many, even the Aegean airlines. Like, people don't realize that you actually have the ability to gain the points in the Aeroplan program, but use them across so many different transfer partners.
Yeah, that's one of the key things that people don't realize. It's like you think of SkyTeam, you think of Star Alliance, and you think of One World. Those are the three major programs to use, and people don't realize. An easy example is that I never fly British Airways. I would never use British Airways points to go to London. I use British Airways to book American flights inside the US because it's cheaper. And I won't use it's like the same thing, right? Like you use a foreign airline to book the opposite kind of currency.
Yeah.
And I would never use like American miles to fly to like British Airways. Like it's so funny because it's like the opposite,
And also the thing with London is that their airport fees are really, really expensive too, right? So even if you do end up finding a good deal with Avios or something, you're going to expect to pay a lot, regardless if you're flying into London.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people, when they have that, they usually go somewhere else. Because London, it's a very good place because it's like, I think it's like 2 or 3 hours away from train from Paris and also like Brussels. You can easily fly into Brussels or like Paris instead and avoid the high surcharges.
Exactly. And that's one thing that, I try to teach people when I'm consulting with them is that, you need to expand your thinking outside of the exact place that you want to go to. You can consider positioning flights if you can't seem to find a flight that works for you where you're trying to go. So if you go to a position flight, you get so much more access to opportunities for different places, and especially in Europe. The one great thing about Europe is that, all the countries are really close together, and travel within Europe is so accessible and easy to do too. So it's a great opportunity for people to fly out to Europe and not having to go pay those extra fees.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like for me, a lot of my good redemptions have also been positioning flights just because it's like once you get the big flight out of the way, then you just need to book the small flight to get to that airport.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm actually on the west coast of Canada, and what I've been doing recently, just because there's for different reasons, but primarily because there's specific airlines that I want to use, but also there's more redemption opportunities. I sometimes will go to the east coast of the U.S. So most recently, earlier this year, I was doing a lot of trips out of New York because, I get access to the different types of airlines that I want to use. And also it gives me the ability to get better redemptions on my flights.
So where do you usually position out of? So like what airport are you based out of in Canada?
I actually live in Victoria, but I go to Vancouver because that's on our mainland. So either I'll go through Vancouver, BC, or if I want to, I can go through Seattle, Washington too, because there's a ferry that goes to Seattle, Washington. So it's just as easy for me to go to either one of those locations, and just the opportunities to fly out there with different airlines and at a way better redemption value. There's so many more options going through Victoria.
Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like for me, like being the West Coast, I definitely do see New York a lot easier for different redemptions just because there's more flights out of there as well. Especially if you're going to Europe. I mean, LAX is a little bit LAX and the SFO in Seattle, they're like okay for like Asia flights and stuff. They're like kind of okay, but like it's really hard to find the really good Europe ones. You're probably better off flying from LAX to like JFK and then taking the Europe flight from there because it's going to cost you less in points too. So those are just things to think about when you position yourself.
Yeah, so being on the west coast of the States or from Canada, depending on which direction you're going, we become the sweet spot for, like you said, going to Asia. If you want to go to Japan, places like that. But if you're trying to go to Europe, definitely, if you usually can get really great deals going into the east coast of either Canada or the US. So that's where you're going to get the better redemptions for Europe there.
What are some of the mistakes that you see people making, like in points and miles, from like the Canada perspective? Just because like in the US we're more familiar, but like how about the Canadians?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I said, that in the States, the game is very pronounced there, and people know like about all these different programs. But the biggest mistake that I see people doing, first of all, is that they get really afraid about the use of credit cards in general. But if you know what you can actually get, what kind of benefits and value you can get from actually using a credit card versus just paying cash or a debit card with it, you know, that makes it so much easier for you to realize that you're spending those dollars anyways, right? So why don't you get the benefit out of them? And then being able to understand if you actually use the correct credit cards and you're actually accelerating the points based on the category of spending you're doing, everything you could do, if you can change nothing with your everyday spending, but you can gain so much more out of it. So that is the biggest thing that I wish people would understand about that. And also like not being scared about credit cards. And I mean, I'm not a big advocate for churning credit cards. I know people have different theories on that kind of stuff, but you can still have such a fruitful, ability to fly on points just with, 2, 3, 4 cards, right? It's just knowing how to use them, which ones to use, and really focusing on one or two programs so you can maximize the points in that particular category. So then you can use those points to regularly travel to where you want to go. Because people just don't even know that these points are available and they just don't know how to redeem them properly. Like I see so many people talking about, just putting credits on their statements with the points. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. There's so many better ways for you to use this. So I think that if people just understand there's just so many more opportunities to use your points, then, it really opens up a new world for them.
So for the Canadians, what are some credit cards that you recommend to start with?
I mean, it really depends on your goals, right? For me personally, when I went on my first trip, I had no idea what I was doing, but I also bought a very high-end credit card. I had the American Express Platinum and the Business Platinum, and they are one of the top, I think one of the top two highest fees in Canada. But the one thing that I realized is that with that one annual fee, and it's gone up since I originally got the card, but the one annual fee and the welcome bonus allowed me the ability to go on the Qatar flights on the Q suites, right? And so people just see it as a really high annual fee, but they don't realize if you utilize the points in a way that actually, if you think about it, if I'm paying, for example, an $800 annual fee, but I get a $16,000 flight out of it just for that first year, I've already made all my money back, right? People just don't see it that way. They just get really intimidated by the annual fee. But if you think about it, yeah, you can get lots of cards that give you no annual fee, but they actually give you no benefit too. So usually when you have cards that have high annual fees, take a look at what those benefits are, right? Like as we know, the American Express Platinum will give you unlimited lounge access. They have excellent travel protection. They give you all these different credits. Again, not as lucrative as the States, but we get lots of credits too, right? But just being able to know how to work the program that you're doing is really important. And there are a lot of lower level cards. The one other card that I'd love to use in Canada here is the American Express Cobalt card. It's only, I believe, $15 a month, but it has a 5 times accelerator for dining and for groceries. That in itself, we all have groceries and we all do dining. Just that card alone can give you a significant amount of points that people can be using towards flights.
That makes sense. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Amex Gold in the US, that's probably one of the most popular cards I use because it's like you eat. So
Yeah.
you're gonna go to a restaurant, you're gonna go buy groceries, you're gonna do those
Yeah.
two things. So that's probably the most common card I use the most in my wallet, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's really important. Like, we all have different expenses. Like, figure out what is your highest expense, and then find a card that's going to manage that type of category the most. The other card that I like to use is a card that actually earns Aeroplan points. And it's good because there are situations where you can't use an American Express, whether it's here or the States or even abroad. Sometimes there are places that you can. So it's always good to have an option where you can collect another currency of points. Just cashback for me has never been as lucrative as collecting the right type of points. So that's what I try to do.
What's it like being your own player one and player two, like by yourself, the solo travels that you have been
Yeah.
doing?
like I said, the first trip was the scariest thing that I had ever done because I just like, you just don't even know. And I really jumped in with 2 feet because I went to the Middle East where I'd never been. I went, really quite far away. I went to Doha, Qatar, and I'm like, I had no idea what I was doing. Because also there's a cultural aspect there too, right? You want to respect the religion and stuff there. But I actually really enjoyed it because you get to, when you're traveling solo, you get to do the things that you want to do. You don't need to worry about Sally Ann or whoever, whatever partner you got with you. You have to go based on their schedule and their quirks, and you're going to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And it opens up so much more ability for you to meet people and get to know more about yourself. Because if you've never traveled by yourself before, how will you ever know what you truly like and what you truly don't like, right? I think that it's just human nature that when we're traveling in groups or with your partner, that, you have to come to some sort of compromise, right? So when you have the ability to travel on your own, you can actually understand what is it that I really like to do or don't like to do. And it just opens up your eyes more, I think, because when you're traveling with a group, you also, end up talking to the person that you're with. You don't really start talking to other people. So it really opens up the ability for you to, get to know other people. And then let's be honest, when you're booking on points, the flexibility is so much better. The availability to find one seat versus multiple seats is always going to be more, right? You can go last minute to wherever, but finding multiple seats is always harder.
What's it like earning points as a player one, like by yourself though? Like, have you found it like it takes a lot more time for you to redeem stuff versus like your other friends who have like a player one and a player two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a different strategy, right? You think about it, yeah, okay, player one, player two strategies are different, but the thing is that when you have a player two, yeah, you can, refer them to different cards where you can get additional points. But the thing is that you're also going to need double the points for you to travel as a couple. So, there's advantages and then disadvantages on both sides of it, right? So I personally, now that I've had the taste of business class, that seems to be the only way I love to travel. But I mean, I do travel other ways too, but I know what I like now. And now I only have to essentially gain half the points as a couple, right? So it's a lot easier for me to get the points that I need to travel there. And even booking last minute flights, as we know, award availability becomes available a lot last minute. And when you're doing it for one person, you need half the amount of points. So to me, it's a great way to handle it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The only
Yeah.
expensive part I would say is probably the hotels then, because then the hotels because you have like hotels if you book like two rooms,
True.
yeah, that's probably the
Yeah,
most.
no, true. I mean, true. I mean, there's pros and cons to any situation, right? But for me, because I'm booking with, I have certain credit cards that give me credits. Like, for example, the American Express Platinum card will give you certain credits. I use their Fine Hotels and Resort program. So they'll giving you like $100 of credit once you're there. They have you, they give you the breakfast. You're staying in a nice high-end hotel that as a solo traveler, for me, it's really important that personal safety is important I want to stay in a place that I feel secure. So yes, it does come at an actual cost when you're not splitting it with two people. But, to me, it's worth it to be able to experience and do the type of trip that I wanted to because I'm getting benefits in other ways.
No, I definitely agree with you. You shouldn't just
Yeah.
wait for one person to come into your life just to like delay travel, like
Well,
using points
yeah.
miles. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's always scared me before. It's like, no, I can't travel unless I go with somebody else, right? But then finding the person to go with, making sure that you get along with that person, you have the same travel style. You and I were talking earlier about like when you're traveling with someone new, you really get to know their travel style real quickly when you travel with them, right? And so some people are more easygoing and some people, have some real weird quirks. You don't have to deal with any of that kind of stuff when you're traveling on your own. You travel the way you want to travel.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
There are pros and cons. I mean, of course, like when you're traveling alone, you're like, man, like I wish I paid the hotel in half. But at the same time, you also get your peace that you might not
Yeah.
get usually.
Yeah. And you can do whatever you want in your hotel room. You might meet somebody along the way, who knows, right? Like you just, it's, I don't know. I find it a lot of fun actually now that I've been doing it.
I'm glad that that milestone birthday like happened for you because then it kind of gave you the wake up call that you really needed, right? Because like you were delaying this for so long because you felt like, no, I'll wait until I meet the right person because then I can split the costs in half to have like
Yeah.
a player too. But then you're like, hey, now it's like ain't nobody got time for that.
And yeah, seriously, you know what? I think that, the one thing that I wished I knew is I could have done this way earlier. And whether it's a partner or even if you want to go on a girls' trip with friends or whatever, right? Like, don't feel like you're going to be bound by anything that you don't need to wait for anybody. If you want to go do the thing, then go do the thing. You don't need someone to go do those things with, right? And I think it really empowers you to learn more about yourself and just the ability of you know, being out there and experience the things that I think so many of us learn when we travel. Like without travel, I think people's perspectives are really narrow. And when you are able to travel, we just learn so much about ourselves and also about the people around us. And I think that we need a lot more of that these days.
No, no, for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like in Canada, what are the popular hotel programs to use?
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of, we do have a bunch of different loyalty programs, but in terms of earning credit card points, the only one that I'm aware of, if you're collecting, points that are specifically for that hotel program is the Marriott Bonvoy program. So there's the American Express Marriott Bonvoy card, and it's a really great card because after the first year, they give you that first night free certificate. So essentially, that annual fee pays for that one night a year that you can use across the global network, which is really good. There is another card that does, there's a lot of cards that you can use in terms of statement credits towards hotels and things like that. Another card that I like to use is the Brim MasterCard because you have the ability to collect Fairmont a la Cour points on there, which is really good too because that's a really good program. But we don't have a card that just collects that specific points value. So in terms of hotel brands, the Marriott Bonvoy is the only one that I'm aware of, unless you're just using credits towards travel as statement credits on that card.
Yeah, because I guess in the US, like you think of like Hyatt, you think of
Yeah,
Marriott, you think of Hilton. We have like all like
exactly.
we have IHG, we have all the major ones.
Yeah, so we do have some Hiltons here, but obviously the majority of them are in the States. But with the American Express Platinum card, you get automatic gold status with the Marriott Bonvoy, but you also get gold status with Hilton too. And that's something that you can utilize for both your trips in Canada and abroad.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like in
Mhm.
Canada, you guys don't have any hotel credit cards besides the Marriott. Like there's no Hilton credit that are
Not that I'm aware of, no.
yeah. It's so funny because like you would think like the same thing in the US that it would translate over to Canada, but I guess it doesn't exactly like translate.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it because the rules are different. We are two separate countries, so the rules and the criteria for the way they allow credit cards to operate is different within our two countries. But that's not to say that you can't get. That's why I'm a real big advocate for like the membership reward program through American Express because they are transferable points. Because then you can have the flexibility to move it over to different programs, and I really love.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Amex is one of my favorite programs to use too. Now that they have like the Hawaiian and Alaska partnership is like now like like finalized. Now you can
Yeah,
easily move the Amex to the Hawaiian and then the Hawaiian to the Alaska. But
we were
just keep
so
in
sad. We had the Alaska Airlines credit card here, but sadly we lost that a couple of years ago. But now with this Hawaiian Alaska Airlines, I'm hoping something comes up where we have the ability to earn those points directly.
yeah, yeah. For like that makes sense too. Yeah, because Alaska is such a good partner to use, especially if you're trying to go to Asia. It's one
Uh-huh,
of the cheaper ones to use for sure.
uh-huh,
But just keep
uh-huh.
in mind, I don't know how it is in Canada, but if we transfer to any Amex, if you transfer any US domestic airlines, so like Delta and Hawaiian, they're like US, you do pay an excise charge. It's not a lot, but just keep that in mind. It's a
Oh,
small
okay.
fee that you have to pay.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing with transferable points that, I know that you guys talk a lot about this and anyone who's considering transferring their points out to whether a hotel or an airline partner, once you transfer them out, they ain't coming back. So you
Mm-mm.
got to really make sure that, it's a program that you want to put them in for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a one-way street, so you always have to double check if the award availability is there and how many seats are left. Just because it gets
Exactly.
kind of antsy when it's like one or two seats left.
So
And if you
again, when you're a
trans
solo traveler, it's even better. You don't need to worry about multiple seats.
exactly, but then if it's like one or two seats left and then you're trying to book it, but you transfer the points and then it gets stuck, that's when
Yeah.
it's kind of like scary. You
Yeah.
really think, did
Yeah.
I make the flight or not? That's when it's because that happened to me actually when I was switching from Amex to Air Canada Aeroplan. Usually it's instant, but
Mhm.
mine got stuck for like a day or two, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have all these airplanes orphan now, and then I'm gonna lose that business class seat. I'm gonna have to sit in economy. But then it made through, and the seat was still there after a few days.
Nice.
But that was kind of like scary,
Yeah, I bet, right? Especially if it's a last minute trip that you're trying to book out. And that's the thing with, when you're booking trips on points that, you either got to book way far out when the availability first comes out, or you got to wait till last minute, right? Anything in between is sort of iffy if you can find the award availability at a decent price for points. And I think that's the one thing that happened to me when I booked my original first flight. I only booked it 3 months out, but I had no idea. I had no idea that, you need to be aware of these things. Granted, I've learned so much since then, but I'm like, I wish I knew this stuff, that don't wait till 3 months before, you should have been booking this a long time ago. In fact, this December I'll be traveling and I had booked that seat a year ago. As soon as availability opened up, because I decided I'm not trying to be here in the winter, so I'm booking somewhere hot. So I did it a year ago. So learning so much more about the landscape of points and miles has just opened up a whole new world for me.
Yeah, and I definitely want to tell people also there's never like a perfect time. I have made
No,
a bunch of mistakes as well. The more important thing is to do is instead of worrying about it and delaying like getting a credit card, not because of financial reasons. If you're not financially stable, of course don't get the credit card. But
exactly.
like if you do have your finances in order and you're just afraid of like opening them because you're afraid you might do something wrong with the miles and points, don't have that mindset because you're never gonna get started then.
Exactly.
Everybody makes mistakes in this hobby, so it's just better to just get started. It just takes time, and then as you spend more time doing this, you learn all the different stuff like, oh, so this is the good average range I should pay for this flight. This program charges a dynamic pricing. This program charges a
Mhm.
word chart. These are things I should look out for. Like, oh, if I fly to this airport because now it's a different zone for the miles, it's actually cheaper for me to fly out of this airport than that airport. And it's only a cheap
Exactly.
economy flight to get to that one. It's like all these little nuances that you learn over time. No one really learns this overnight. So the more important
Exactly.
step is just to get started on this. And like we said, we do have the Bougie and Backpack Virtual Summit. So if you're catching this after the virtual summit has happened in October, we do have show notes and the replays available in the show notes. So definitely do look into that as well. We do also have a free blueprint if you want to learn about different types of credit cards as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have a couple of different things that I do also through my website. Instagram is where I spend a lot of my time sort of trying to teach people specifically about the Canadian landscape. And the one thing that I always tell people, especially when they're getting started, is about just sort of having a vision about where they want to go. You might not have a specific location, but just an idea of the type of trip that you want. So I always encourage people to have a vision of what that looks like. And from there, you can start to build a strategy in order to decide which credit cards you want to use and which points programs that you want to do. So I have a vision board that you can get through Instagram or also through my website. I'll share it with you and you can share it on your show notes. And then I also have a travel checklist. If you do know which destination that you want to go to, then I've created a travel checklist where, you can sort of figure out how many points that you need, and then you can start building a strategy for that. Because I think, like you said, it's just about being empowered with that knowledge. A lot of people don't even know where to get started. So without getting started, you just need to make a few mistakes along the way, but these tools will help you get started in terms of deciding where you want to go and also specifically about how many points that you might need in order to get started. And then get onto my newsletter, and I share lots of specific tips for Canadians. And so, yeah, I think, like you've already said, just getting started is the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. But honestly, knowledge is power, right? We hear this all the time, right? Like there's so many things that we're just not taught. And so I think that, this is a great space for us to be having conversations like this where we can actually teach people. Like there's just so many opportunities out there, but you just don't know about them. So, I really appreciate like being able to have these conversations, because if you don't know, you don't know, right? But now you know. And so now you can learn.
No, I definitely have that vibe as well. Just
Yeah,
because you don't know until you try. That's just the
exactly.
reality of anything.
Yeah, yeah, no. So I mean, like I said, I wish I knew this like 20 years ago, but alas, here we are. So, but yeah, it's never too late to start. That's sort of the one key thing that I'll take away with me. For me, learn, I'm just talking about my personal experience. Like I mentioned, that was my first solo trip on my milestone birthday. And you know what? I just hope that women especially, right? Like we're always feeling like, we have to travel with somebody. And, I think that it's really important to understand that, building that self-confidence and just starting out is the biggest thing. But you learn so much about yourself when you start traveling in this way. And, it's my biggest takeaway is it's never too late to start. And also, you have the power to keep learning every day, and age should never stop you from doing that.
Yeah, those are good words of wisdom to think about. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a good one.
Thanks, Angel.